All right, so today we're diving into something that you probably have at home. Scented wax melts. You wouldn't think there's a whole lot to it, right? It's just to melt the wax and enjoy the fragrance.
Right.
But we're taking a deep dive into some research in environmental science and technology letters. And it might make you reconsider what's actually floating around in that lovely scented air.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, we're often drawn to wax melts because they seem like a safer, cleaner alternative to candles.
Right.
No smoke, no soot, just those delightful aromas.
Yeah.
But the study suggests those scents might be releasing something we don't actually see.
Okay.
Nanoparticles.
Nanoparticles. That sounds a little more sci-fi than my living room.
Right.
Can you break down what nanoparticles are and how they're connected to melting wax?
So imagine something so tiny it's measured in nanometers.
Okay.
And that's 1/1000th of a meter.
Wow.
These particles are so small they can bypass our body's usual defenses,
Okay.
going deep into our lungs and even potentially entering the bloodstream. And this study found that the reaction between certain compounds released from wax melts and ozone in the air can actually produce these nanoparticles.
Interesting.
And in quantities comparable to burning candles.
Wow. That's pretty alarming.
Yeah.
Okay, so back up for a second. How do these wax melts actually work? I mean, I know the wax melts and it releases a scent, but what's happening on like a chemical level?
It's all about those volatile organic compounds, or VOCs.
VOCs, got it.
Yeah. As the wax melts, it releases fragrance compounds, which are VOCs.
Okay.
These compounds evaporate into the air, filling your home with those pleasing scents.
So are all VOCs created equal when it comes to this nanoparticle situation?
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
The main VOCs to watch out for in this case are terpenes.
Okay.
You know that fresh citrusy scent of a lemon or the invigorating aroma of pine needles?
Yeah.
Those are terpenes commonly found in plants and essential oils.
Interesting.
And it's the reaction between these terpenes and ozone, which is naturally present in indoor air that can lead to nanoparticle formation.
Hold on. So those lovely natural scents that we associate with essential oils and, kind of those clean fragrances could be contributing to this nanoparticle issue.
Yeah.
That's not what I expected.
It really challenges our assumptions about what's safe and healthy, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
And to put this into perspective, the study compared the estimated inhalation of nanoparticles from wax melts to that from gas stoves.
Gas stoves. Now that's surprising.
Yeah.
Are they saying that melting wax could release a similar level of nanoparticles as like cooking on a gas stove?
That's what the research suggests.
Wow.
And it's significant because we're becoming more aware of the impact gas stoves can have on indoor air quality.
Right. Okay, so we have these terpenes reacting with ozone, creating these nanoparticles, and we're finding out that the levels could be similar to what's coming from a gas stove.
Right.
But why are we so concerned about nanoparticles in the first place? What makes them potentially harmful?
It all comes down to their size. Because nanoparticles are so incredibly small, they can penetrate deep into our lungs, potentially leading to respiratory issues. And the study cites research linking nanoparticle exposure to decreased cognitive function and increased asthma risk.
That's definitely something I'd rather not be breathing in.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we're trading the visible smoke of candles for the potentially invisible nanoparticles with wax melts.
Exactly. It's a reminder that things aren't always as straightforward as they seem.
Yeah, so this study also found that unscented wax melts didn't produce nanoparticles.
Right.
Why is that?
It goes back to those terpenes.
Okay.
Unscented melts don't have the fragrance compounds. So the reaction with ozone doesn't occur and no nanoparticles form.
Got it.
It really highlights the role of those fragrance compounds in this whole process.
Yeah, it's ironic, isn't it? The very thing that draws us to wax melts, the fragrance, could be contributing to a potential health risk.
It really is.
This has definitely been an eye-opener.
Yeah.
So we've uncovered a potential downside to those fragrant wax melts. But what can we do about it? We'll explore that and more right after this.
Welcome back. So before the break, we were uncovering the possibility that even without a flame, those pleasant-smelling wax melts could be releasing nanoparticles into our homes.
Right.
Potentially at levels comparable to a gas stove.
It's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
I mean, we often reach for those wax melts thinking they're a healthier alternative to candles.
Yeah.
But this research really makes you question that assumption.
It certainly does, and it raises some interesting questions about how we approach home fragrance in general.
Right, because it's not just about avoiding smoke and soot anymore.
Right.
It's about understanding these invisible particles that we might be introducing into our air.
Exactly.
But let's say someone listening isn't quite ready to give up their wax melts just yet.
Uh-huh.
Are there any ways to mitigate the potential risks while still enjoying those fragrances?
That's a common question, and unfortunately there isn't a straightforward answer yet. More research is needed to give us specific guidelines on minimizing nanoparticle exposure from wax melts. But there are some things we can consider based on what we know so far.
Okay, what are some steps that people can take to be more cautious?
Well, ventilation is always a good starting point.
Oh,
Think about using wax melts in well-ventilated areas.
got it.
Opening a window, running a fan, or using an air purifier can help circulate the air and reduce the concentration of particles.
That makes sense.
Anything else?
Well, remember those terpenes.
Yeah.
Since they seem to be the main players in nanoparticle formation, you might consider choosing wax melts with different fragrance profiles.
So maybe opting for floral or musky scents instead of the bright citrusy ones that are often terpene heavy.
Exactly.
Interesting. Are there any other types of scents that we should be watching out for?
It would be great to have a definitive list of good scents and bad scents.
Right.
But we're not quite there yet. The research is still evolving, and fragrance blends can vary widely between brands. So avoiding certain scents might not be the answer. It sounds like we need to be more aware of the specific ingredients in our wax melts.
Yes.
And maybe even do a little research into the fragrance compounds that are used.
Exactly. And this is where it can get a little tricky because ingredient transparency isn't always a priority for fragrance companies.
Right.
But hopefully, as we learn more about the potential risks of nanoparticles, we'll see more transparency and clearer guidelines for consumers.
Transparency is key, especially when it comes to our health.
Absolutely.
In the meantime, it sounds like the biggest takeaway here is awareness.
For sure.
We need to be mindful that even those seemingly harmless products can have unexpected consequences.
Mm-hmm.
It's about being informed and making choices based on the best available information.
I completely agree. And remember, science is a constantly evolving process. New research emerges all the time, often challenging our assumptions and prompting us to reevaluate our choices.
It's a good reminder that we can't just assume what we know today will hold true forever. We have to stay curious, stay informed, and be open to changing our minds as new information comes to light.
Precisely. And this brings us to a crucial skill we need to cultivate, especially in this age of information overload.
And what's that?
Critical thinking.
We talk about critical thinking a lot on the show,
Yes.
but how does it apply to a situation like this?
Yeah.
How do we navigate this constant stream of information and figure out what's really important when making choices about the products we use and the potential risks they might pose?
It starts with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Okay.
Question assumptions. Don't take things at face value just because they sound good or align with what you already believe.
Right.
Look for evidence, consider different viewpoints, and be willing to adjust your thinking when new information emerges.
So in this case, even though wax melts are often marketed as a safer alternative to candles, we need to dig a little deeper look at the research and consider the potential downsides as well.
Exactly. And it's not about becoming paranoid or avoiding everything that could potentially pose a risk.
Right.
It's about weighing the benefits and the risks, making informed choices, and taking steps to minimize potential harm whenever possible.
And sometimes that might mean making changes to our habits or choices, even if it's something we enjoy.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that our choices have consequences both for ourselves and the world around us.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation.
It has.
We've learned that the world of scented wax melts is far more complex than it appears on the surface.
For sure.
But before we wrap up this episode, I'm curious about your final thoughts.
Okay.
What do you hope our listeners take away from this exploration? Welcome back. We've been unpacking this world of scented wax melts, and honestly, it's a lot more complicated than I ever imagined.
Yeah, it really is.
But before we wrap up, I want to revisit something you mentioned earlier about critical thinking. It really resonated with me,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to something like wax melts, which we often associate with, relaxation and creating a pleasant atmosphere at home. How can we apply those critical thinking skills to make smarter choices about home fragrance?
Well, one place to start is questioning assumptions.
Okay.
We often see products that are labeled as natural or eco-friendly, and we automatically assume they must be safe.
Right.
But as we've seen with the wax melts, natural doesn't always equal harmless.
Right. We tend to equate natural with good and synthetic with bad,
Yeah.
but it's not that simple.
Exactly. Nature is full of potent substances, some of which can be harmful.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's about going beyond those surface level claims and really examining the ingredients, the research, and the potential risks. And it's also about recognizing that there's rarely a simple black and white answer.
There's always more to learn, and that's what makes it so fascinating, right?
Absolutely. It's about embracing that complexity and acknowledging that our understanding is constantly evolving.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from this exploration of scented wax melts?
For me, it's the realization that our homes aren't these isolated bubbles, you know?
Right.
Even seemingly small choices, like how we fragrance our space, can have broader implications.
Yeah,
The products we use, the air we breathe, it's all interconnected.
it really is.
And by understanding these connections and thinking critically about the information we encounter, we can make choices that are better for both ourselves and the environment.
That's such an important reminder. It's not just about the nanoparticles themselves,
Right.
but about understanding that our actions have consequences and being mindful of that bigger picture.
Precisely.
Well, this deep dive has certainly given us a lot to think about.
It has.
It's amazing how something as simple as a scented wax melt can spark such a thought-provoking conversation.
It really speaks to the power of curiosity and the importance of questioning what we think we know.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this journey of discovery.
Oh, thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure having you here.
It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners, we hope this episode has encouraged you to take a closer look at the world around you, to ask questions, and to embrace that ongoing process of learning. Remember, knowledge is power, and the more we learn, the better equipped we are to make choices that benefit ourselves and the planet. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.